Okay, we're going to go through the steps on how to replace your engine coolant. I got about 30,000 miles on this bike, so it's way overdue. And I already removed this piece of plastic that goes across the control panel. That's for getting in and replacing the speakers. And so you don't need to take that piece off to do the engine coolant. But the engine coolant fill is underneath this cover. So we'll start out by removing this strip, which I already removed. I just kind of put it in place. I also already removed this and disconnected the grip heater. But basically, if you use like a screwdriver with some tape on it to protect the paint or the plastic, what you want to do is slide the screwdriver under here and then work this edge up, and then kind of get your fingers under and then pull this up. And it's kind of hard at first. You'll kind of feel it snap away. There's a couple snaps that are on the back that hold it really well. And then along the edge are little clips that hold this piece to the fairing. And you'll need to kind of go back and forth as you're lifting up, and you'll work this up, and then there's a little tab here that goes under here that you'll pull out, and that's all it takes to get this piece off. And basically these are the two clips, these are the little clips, and we'll put that here. And then the next thing, you want to take this cover off with the grip heater controls. There's two screws that you take out, Allen screws, and then this pivots out of the way, and then you want to disconnect these three connections, and then it's a white, black, and a red wire. And I just labeled the other side red and white just so I'll know what to do, how to hook it back up when I put everything back together. And right here is where the engine coolant fill cap is. And the last piece, there's two pieces that you need to remove still. One is the cover plate on the other side. I'll show you how to take that off. And then we're going to take off the front piece of plastic that's underneath the front here, so that we can get to where the drain plug is for the coolant. And then the next step, you want to get this cover off. And this is just sitting in here like this. You kind of work your fingers underneath and you just pop this off. And there's basically, you know, this spot, and this spot, and this spot that are holding this cover snapped onto this here. So you take this guy off, and then right here is your overflow for your coolant. So we'll be getting into that a little bit later. Okay, next we're going to take off this piece here. And there's 6 screws and 2 push pins holding it on. There's a screw that holds it on here. There's a couple screws that hold it on up here. And then there's 2 push pins that look like this. And those actually sit, one here, there's one on the other side. So you have this screw, these 2 screws, and the same 3 screws on the other side of the bike, and the 2 push pins, one here and one over there. So I took those out already, and then now just need to slide this piece back and forth. It's actually pretty easy to get it out, and just be careful you don't scratch it up when you pull it out. Okay, next we're going to go ahead and remove the drain plug, and the drain plug is right here. And this is your oil filter, so it's just barely above your oil filter. And we'll use an 8mm socket with a little extension. And it's not that tight. And you want to have a pan underneath. And it shouldn't come out too fast. It should actually come out pretty slow because I still have the fill cap in for the coolant. See, just a little bit came out. Okay, as we crack this guy, air's going to rush in, and as you can hear, we have coolant draining out now. Okay, I removed the radiator fill cap for the coolant. Now plenty of air can get in, and it's just about ready to be finished up draining. Now for the overflow tank, I just have a piece of hose with a syringe on it, and I'm going to suck out whatever coolant is in there. And then put this in the pan. Put it back in. Okay, the coolant is all sucked out of the overflow reservoir, and I'm going to put the plug back in, and I'm going to use the same crush washer. I'm not going to use the new one yet, just because I'm going to flush the system with some distilled water. So I'm going to go ahead and reinstall the drain plug. You want to make sure you do this when the engine is cold. You don't want to do any coolant work when the engine's hot. Okay, now we're going to actually fill up the bike with some distilled water. You don't want to use normal water, like tap water. You only want to use distilled water. And you wouldn't have to do this step using the distilled water, but I'm just going to flush the system with it. Okay, the bike is filled up with the distilled water. The water's just shy of, about that far from the top. I'm going to start the bike up and get it warmed up.
Country's only a cappella band live in concert.
Just let it warm up, and from time to time, give it a little bit of juice. I'm going to go ahead and put a little bit more distilled water in. Okay, I put a little bit more water in, and as you run the bike, you'll see bubbles and stuff coming up out of your fill area. And you might need to stop and go ahead and add a little bit more water just as the bubbles come up out of the system. All the bubbles seem to have worked themselves out, and I got the cap back on there. It's full of distilled water. So now I'm just going to let the bike run and get nice and warm and let the pump turn on. And okay, the bike's cooled down, engine's cooled down. I'm going to go ahead and drain the distilled water. And it's just that plug. I need to remove the plug. Okay, after taking out the plug, we'll go ahead and crack the lid again. And then you should get quite a bit more coolant coming out. And then we'll come back in a little bit when it's all done draining. Okay, we'll take the overflow reservoir tank cap off again. Like that. And then take our setup that we made and drain out any distilled water and coolant that's in there. Okay, all the distilled water is finished draining. I'm just going to go ahead and put the plug back in. I put the new crushed washer on there, sealing washer. You don't need to tighten it really tight. Okay, we have our plug in, and we have our funnel, a couple rags. We'll take the rags and kind of put them around the fill cap, the fill area. Just try and keep any of the coolant from spilling over. You got to pour really slow with this, otherwise it's easy to get the coolant to spill. And I'm just using the HP coolant. It's a 50-50 blend. There's probably other types out there, but this is what the Honda dealership recommends. And well, better get going. Take the funnel, open her up. And the trick is just to pour really slow. Now the newer coolant, I'm not sure which years, but the newer coolant is blue. And I don't know if you noticed, the coolant that I had in there was green, which was the older stuff. From what I understand, the blue and the green coolant can be mixed, but now the HP coolant from the Honda dealer is blue now. So I'll go ahead and fill this up and then come back. Okay, I've started up the bike a few times and just give it a little throttle, let it run for a little bit and then turn it off, and you'll find that, you know, bubbles will kind of come up out of here, and then just top it off again and kind of do that a few times. And you want to run it to the point you're not getting, you know, bubbles coming up. And then I'll show you what you do over on the reservoir side, just over here. Okay, the coolant is checked and it's full on the radiator side. And then I'm going to come over to the coolant reservoir and go ahead and check that. And you just need a rag, pull your cap off with the dipstick, check and make sure it's clean, wipe it down real good, and you want to go ahead and put it in, and then pull it out, and then check the coolant level, which in this case it's right in the middle. Here's your upper indicator, here's the level the coolant is at, and then this mark here is your lower level that you want to stay above. So we're good, we're right just above the middle. If you needed to add more, what you do is go ahead and, you know, put your funnel in, add it real slow, don't add a lot, and then go ahead and, you know, check your level frequently. And we'll do that one more time. Wipe it down real good. It's probably hard to see, but it's just about in the middle. I'll go ahead and add just a tad more. Do a quick check again. Yep, that looks perfect. And what I'm going to do is put the cap back on. I'll put the cap back on the radiator. And I checked my drain plug earlier, and that's good, no leaks. So I'm going to go ahead and do a quick ride and then come back, let the bike cool down, and do one last check, make sure levels look good. Okay, just finished going around for a quick ride and did one last check, make sure I got all the bubbles out and removing the rags. And got the cap on there right. Did a quick inspection of the cap just to make sure everything looks good. Did one last check, you know, with the reservoir tank. Basically, you know, checking this guy just to make sure the coolant is between. Actually, I put it closer to the top mark on the full. And I was looking in the manual real fast, and they mentioned that you want to check it, you know, after you ride and the engine is, you know, up to full temp, and you want to have it either on a center stand or the bike, you know, standing upright. And you can check your coolant, you know, one last time here, so I'm good with that. My plug that's down, you know, underneath here, back underneath here, everything is good to go. Let me get a light and set up the camera, and I'll show you a couple things with putting this piece of plastic back on that is kind of tricky. Okay, I just wanted to show you this piece right here is actually really hard to get back on, and I ended up kind of trying to shift back this way, and you're trying to pull this part of the fairing, you know, up and out of the way. So probably the trickiest part is getting, you know, this fastener here. Take the flashlight. Getting this fastener here set up right. So the way it works is you have this piece, this middle piece, that sits on top. Then the part of the fairing that's connected to this guy is in the middle. And then the piece of plastic that has the threaded snap-on nut piece, that's part of the piece we just put back on. So it's 3 layers. You have this piece here goes on top, then you have this piece here, there's kind of a tong or a flange that comes down underneath this guy that's sandwiched in the middle, and then you have this piece coming in the very back. And this is the one that has the longest screw. So once you get this piece, you know, in the back, then you can put, you know, the 6 screws on this one, and, you know, the other ones that go around. That was probably the trickiest part, was getting this piece back on. So I'm going to finish putting the rest of the plastic pieces back on the bike, and that's what it takes to do your coolant change.